Zweig Group invites all AEC industry leaders to the 2024 AEC Small Business and Entrepreneurship Forum, the premier event for small firms in the AEC sector. Experience innovative strategies and insights on May 21st, crafted by Zweig Group's industry experts. Engage in keynotes and interactive sessions focused on recruitment, retention, and business growth. Join Zweig Group for this unique networking opportunity and take your business to new heights. Secure your spot today and be part of the AEC industry's future. Visit zweiggroup.com for more information. The Zweig Group team looks forward to welcoming you.
You're listening to a special edition Zweig Letter podcast, putting architectural, engineering, planning, and environmental consulting guru Mark Zweig and his team of experts straight talk in your ear. Mark has more than 30 years of experience helping AEP and environmental firms thrive, and these podcasts deliver his invaluable management, industry, client, and HR advice directly to you, free of charge. The Zweig Letter and the Zweig Letter podcasts let you develop professionally wherever you are.
Hey everyone, and thank you for joining Zweig Group Media and the Zweig Letter exclusive interview series. With almost 25 years of continuous coverage of the design industry, the Zweig Letter is a constant in an ever-changing marketplace. We are bringing you some of the best and brightest minds that our industry has to offer. Today, I'm pleased to welcome Chris Catton, who is a consultant in our executive search group here at Zweig Group. Chris, it is so great to have you join us on the Zweig Letter interview series. This is your first time, and I've been trying to twist your arm to come on this podcast and on this video and have a conversation with me. And finally, the audience gets to hear from the great Chris Catton in San Francisco. So, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about what you do here at Zweig Group, and we're so excited to have you.
Hi, Rainey. Thanks for having me. I lead executive search projects for architecture and engineering consulting firms.
Okay.
And I run the San Francisco office, which is growing. We're now at 2. And I conduct roundtable lunches that are speaking series for a local management group. So I do some speaking and help my clients learn how to recruit.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah, and we're going to talk a little bit about that that organization. I believe it's ABLE, right? It's the Association of AE Business Leaders.
That's right.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we'll talk about ABLE in a minute. So tell me, I mean, what's a day like for you out there in San Francisco? And I might add for those that are listening or watching, Chris was how like nowadays when you talk about tech firms, you might say, oh, so-and-so was number 5 at Facebook or number 4 at Google, but you were like number 4 or 5 at Zweig, right? When the original Mark Zweig
I was
Inc.
number 8. Yeah, I think I was the 8th hire back in 1992.
Wow. And that's actually the same year that the Zweig Letter started. So that's why I always tell people that it's over 25 years, because this is 2017. That was 1992. The Zweig Letter has run uninterrupted since then. And so you kind of, if nothing else, it kind of makes us old, I guess, in the minds of everybody, because you started in 92. I started my first go around at Zweig in 97. And then I know you left for a while to start a family, and now you've come back and you've done some great things in between, and you've been intimately familiar with the design industry for many years, because you even before you worked at Zweig, you worked for an architecture firm, isn't that right?
I did. I worked for 2 architecture firms.
Okay.
The first firm I joined right out of school, they had a really cool program that I think has since flourished in various firms around San Francisco, where they would hire non-technical people to act as sort of as junior project managers. So we would take care of notes and minutes and scheduling and invoices and anything that helped keep the communication going with clients and between the team members. So I learned from the inside about the business of architecture. In fact, I was recruited away from the first firm that I joined to start that same program at the second firm
Wow.
because they'd heard about it. And it was great because a lot of times architects don't like the busy work of the project management. And it was something that they were able to hand off to someone who was less expensive. So from a financial standpoint on the projects, it was really valuable to the firm because the more expensive, project managers who had a higher billing rate were not spending time on things that someone less expensive on the project could do. So it was a great way for me to springboard into recruiting because I knew exactly how the business worked from the inside, and I know now and knew then or learned then how projects work, how they come together, what sub-consultants do, kind of who runs the job, what architects think about, what they're motivated by. It was a really good glance at the business as a whole. So it was a smart strategy, actually, on Mark Zweig's part to pursue people in a position like I was in, which is what happened. I think I got a call from Catherine Sprankle way back when, and they specifically were seeking people that had an inside scoop into the business of an architecture or an engineering firm, and I just happened to work out.
Wow.
So it was a smart strategy on their part because I was able to talk the talk. When I get people on the phone, they know I understand their day and their business and their motivations. That's a big part of why I think I'm good at recruiting, is that I know that they know that I know them. Did that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. And, I'm glad you mentioned that because I think that level of training, I mean, that's something that I got when I first started, back in 97. And I'd like to think that I was trained properly in the art of recruiting, but especially in the art of recruiting in the design space, because there are a lot of nuances like you described in that you were intimately familiar with what the day looks like for an architect, possibly even for an engineer. And so with that understanding, it creates a much it gives you a much greater talking points to have with people that you're recruiting and coming in contact with. And people actually feel like, wow, she actually knows what she's talking about. He knows what he's talking about because we understand the industry. And I think that's an important distinction that you don't always find, especially in the space of recruiting and specifically in executive search, which, again, this podcast is not a calling card for our recruiting services, but it is a very important distinction and point to be made for anybody out there in the design space, knowing that, when you hire someone to do recruiting and to represent your firm, you should get somebody that really understands your industry. If you don't, you do so at your own peril because you've got people out there all the time misrepresenting firms and opportunities. And, sometimes, as you know, Chris, you only get one bite at the apple when you're talking to really talented people. And you've got to kind of, as I like to say, come correct the first time. Yeah,
that's true. That's definitely true. There's a lot to know about our industry. It's unique in a lot of ways.
Yeah. So, and that's the thing I've liked. And I mean, certainly Mark Zweig has imparted his understanding and knowledge. And then we've got the benefit of, all the great articles in the Zweig Letter and all of the great ideas and information that have welled up in all of our publications over the years that, have helped both you and I to be better at our jobs, as well as anybody that we've brought in. We've got a fresh crop of younger people and newer folks. You've got a new team member, and, we're constantly training these guys to understand the industry as a whole and what makes this industry so special. So that's pretty exciting. Why don't you tell me just a little bit about, some of the conversations that you've had recently when you spoke at some of these ABLE events. And I know that they have kind of like lunch and learn events around the Bay Area. I know you've done one in San Francisco. I think you had to go somewhere up on the inland going up towards Sacramento recently. And I know that these are really, they're really great times of teaching and kind of figuring out and learning what are the major pain points that firms are encountering, especially in the area of recruitment and retention. So I would love for you just to kind of talk about what your experience was like, what you talked about specifically, and then we can maybe go into some of the feedback that you got from people in terms of what folks are seeing out there in the market, especially as it pertains to recruitment and retention.
My first thought is, to explain that ABLE hosts luncheon roundtables for anyone who chooses to come, members and non-members. There's a paid difference, but these luncheon roundtables are hosted by various firms. So they're often either in San Francisco or in the Sacramento area or in Irvine, in Orange County. So it'll be in the conference room of the hosting firm from within our industry. And they serve lunch, and then we sit around and talk for about it. I think they're an hour and a half, and they're facilitated. So I have served as a facilitator. The value of these lunches or these events, and there are various events. ABLE also does hosted all-afternoon events that have panels of speakers that make specific presentations. But the luncheon roundtables, the value in those is for everyone to hear from each other how they're handling problems that they're facing. And then there's a topic. And so the facilitator helps to keep everybody on topic and kind of steer the conversation, and maybe answer some questions. I can answer some questions about recruitment, and there was some of that. And I had a presentation that led our conversation, but a lot of the value comes from them hearing from each other.
Yeah.
And me too, what problems they're facing and how they're addressing them. And with regard to retention and recruitment, I found that retention was the biggest concern for everybody.
Wow.
Recruitment has been talked about now for as long as our economy's been back and healthy as a primary issue for people, because everyone's trying to recruit the same key talent. And, it's sort of a recruitment war out there. So it's dependent upon each firm to make themselves the attractive employer, basically. But there's also this feeling of, well, once we've got them, how do we keep them? And so I found that to be almost more of a concern, because it's really expensive and sad to lose good people. And so that to me was interesting, because what I found to be the case was that people don't look at retention as something of a line item on a strategic plan.
Right.
It's almost like an afterthought. And so I brought up a retention plan, and everyone looked at me like, what? What's a retention plan? And I think it's just something that needs to be taken seriously as a line item on the strategic plan. And what that could entail is making, managers and group leaders responsible for tracking their turnover rates, tracking their retention rates, checking in with their people when they lose people, keeping those numbers and making people feel responsible as leaders and project managers for keeping people, and really having it trickle down from leadership to the lowest level of management to help people understand that retention has to be approached with a plan like everything else.
Yeah.
So that was interesting to me, that was the biggest concern, because a lot of it sometimes seems like common sense. And I think people get busy in their jobs and they forget about it. They forget about these basics. Like, here's an example. The manager calling to check in and say, how you doing? Are you happy? How's the project working out for you? Or what complaints do you have? And just doing a random casual check-in. Right. That makes people feel really heard, and just something like that can make people feel really loyal to their position because they're being checked in with on a casual level. So that's just, I'm getting very specific, but that's just one example that the table, we all went around and kind of raised our eyebrows at how that doesn't seem difficult and it doesn't seem beyond common sense, but nobody really does it. So that's just one example. Yeah.
Mark Zweig always talks about management by walking around, going around and talking to people. Really talking to them, and, not having folks come to you when everything hits the fire, but, just talking to people on a regular basis. So you're having real conversations that, genuinely lead to admiration, respect, and also being able to head problems off at the pass before they even happen.
Right. The other thing is the missing generation. I think the most difficult position for people to fill right now is between 5 and 10 years experience, because people, and this has become a known problem, but everyone's talking about how do we address the fact that it's absolutely beyond difficult to find them, let alone get them.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of conversation about that, and people are resorting to signing bonuses. There's what you've discussed before, the gig economy, where there's more use of temporary staffing for typically for production level positions,
Right.
but people are having to get creative to fill these positions.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I mean, it is a major problem right now. And so certainly it's an issue that has to be talked about. People have to come up with ideas and creative ways within their own organizations to solve these problems. And, you brought up a key distinction that, and I've talked about KPIs or key performance indicators. And, if you don't know what to track, you'll never be successful. And you've got to figure out what are those metrics that we have to keep track of. And, we're in a time and a place now where, we have so much information at our disposal, but we don't always use it properly. And I'm always encouraging firms, as I know you are, to keep track of this information, because it will, if we don't do it, it can ultimately create a problem for the organization as a whole and for the overall health of how they're operating, especially when it comes to talent acquisition.
That's exactly right. My presentation, I have 3 sections primarily, and then I go into some other bits at the end. But they're planning, recruiting is planning, recruiting is selling, and recruiting is knowing. Okay. And the knowing part is about just that. It's about tracking metrics. It's about keeping in touch with them. It's about watching if something rises or falls and then actually reacting to it and doing something about it. Recruitment plans need to have those metrics tracked, however small the firm is. A lot of people don't bother to do that. So it is sort of a crystal ball looking into, the issues that you face and what's worked and what hasn't.
Right. Yeah, no, it's very important. And you're right.
Sorry, I want to add one thing, because one thing I've noticed is that firms have gotten a lot more sophisticated at how they're doing this now, because they've had to. And when we go around this table at the luncheon, I've noticed an impressive jump in people's sophistication with regard to recruitment.
Okay.
Because they've had to step it up to be better. And so that's part of the fun of doing these roundtables, is I come away feeling like these firms have really learned, over the past several years, how to improve. There's always room for improvement, right? But they're doing much better at thinking in a sophisticated way about how to be an attractive place of employment.
Yeah.
A lot of time back in the 90s, I don't know that people put as much thought into it.
No, and it's funny, like we always tell people nowadays, I mean, you're not doing anyone a favor by talking to them about an opportunity at your firm. I mean, you have to basically put your sales hat on. I liken it to Glengarry Glen Ross, always be closing. You always have to be on your game when it comes to talking about your organization, why people should come work there, why your firm versus another firm.
Exactly.
And you have to be thinking that way. The minute that you posture yourself to act as if, and we get this from clients from time to time, where they're like, well, why does this person want to make a move? Well, they don't want to make a move. That's you and I both recruit people that are not actively looking. The key word is they're not looking. So when you talk to anyone that's not looking, it's kind of like if I walk onto the showroom floor of a car dealership, if I'm not looking for a car, you've got to sell me on why I need to buy this car, why I need to go fill out a credit report and go, take some money out of the bank or write a check for a down payment on a particular car. You've got to sell me on that. I'm not there to sell you on why you should sell me a car. So the idea is that firms need to understand that and take a different approach to how they talk to candidates, even those that are looking or that send a resume in, because nowadays candidates have a lot of options. They have a ton of options.
It's true. And this is actually something that I think is also improving, that people are starting to understand this more and more. But when I take on a search, that's one of the first things I talk with my client about is their ability to put their mind in that place and not have that kind of old school feeling that, everybody's lucky to be considered.
Right,
and,
right.
That the minute you decide to go search for somebody, there's going to be a line of people at the door because you think you're great. I mean,
Right.
You are great, but I think I think people have learned a lot in the last few years, and have gotten a lot better about that attitude.
Yeah.
There's a grace to it, a gracefulness to thinking I need to put my best foot forward just as the candidate does.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, again, you're right. There are firms that are getting better. There are some firms that I've seen that have regressed, but overall, I think people are figuring that out and making their place a much more inviting atmosphere for potential candidates that may end up joining them. So.
Yeah, that's a mindset, and it's also a culture that a tone is set by leadership. Mm-hmm. That's one of the things we talked about at the recent roundtable, that it's very important to have a principal or a practitioner in the firm that's in a leadership role talk a lot about recruitment and make it known that it's a value and that it's an expectation.
Yeah.
And every single firm at the last roundtable, and I think there were about 12 firms represented, was utilizing the employee referral bonus program, where if one of their employees referred somebody and that person was hired, they were paid a bonus fee for that.
Yep.
And the range in that fee was from anywhere from $500 to one firm was paying $10,000 for senior positions. So if you referred someone for a senior role and they were hired as a senior manager, I mean, that's a lot of money.
It is a lot of money.
It's a very good motivation. So I don't know if I felt like if that was as common back in the 90s. Again, I'm drawing these distinctions because I think it's important to note that the level of sophistication has gone up.
Yeah.
But that's one of the things that these people are finding, or that the people are finding works, is paying referrals, bonus fees to their employees.
Yeah, no, I know. We were working with a firm that the hiring manager told us that he had to slow one of his guys down because he had referred 6 people to the firm
in a year,
in a year, to the tune of $3,000 a pop. This guy had made an extra $18K referring some of his friends, and I think it's important to understand that. I always tell people, the best people to talk about your firm are the people that work there, because they know your firm and they know why. And you want to encourage them. With that said, I know Mark Zweig has never been a huge fan of employee referral bonuses and things of that nature. And there's always going to be a couple of different schools of thought about that. Some people don't like it from the simple fact that, well, if you have somebody refer a friend and then the firm doesn't hire them, does that then ostracize or tell that current employee that they're not important, that you don't value their thought about their friend or whatever? And I don't think that certainly is the case, but you in Mark's mind, you run the risk of alienating existing employees if you don't take on one of the people that they refer to the firm. And so it can go both ways. And I mean, there are arguments for and against it. Like I said, that gentleman that got 6 referrals in a year and that company that hired all those individuals, I'm sure they're not complaining, because we all know how tight the market is right now in the design industry. So, I think if you can find people, make it work, come up with a plan that makes sense for your organization. And also, if there are situations where somebody, a valued member of your team, refers somebody to you that you don't end up hiring, explain to them why you don't hire them.
That's what I was going to say.
And then just go from there. So
yeah, it's fixed with good communication.
Absolutely. I always say manage people's expectations. So.
And I think Mark has also said before that there is a feeling that that people should be doing that anyway, and they should be getting paid for it. But I think that that's just an extra motivation.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I'm just repeating what I see in the marketplace, that people utilize this program and that it's working.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, so tell me, I mean, given that, you're I always like in the Bay Area, and I mean, again, Zweig has had a presence in the Bay Area for many years now, but, there's always some unique stuff going on in the design industry out in, especially in Northern California. I mean, of course, LA too. So those of you that are in Southern California, please don't send me hate mail. But I mean, the Bay Area is kind of unique in the work that's coming out of there, and there's some actually fabulous firms that are domiciled out of San Francisco specifically. So I mean, is anything you're seeing happening lately that's of interest to you from in the recruiting space at all?
Did you mean design?
Yeah, for sure.
I'm not sure I understand the question, but the Transbay Terminal is the coolest thing going on right now.
Okay.
Is that what you meant? Like
Well,
design?
yeah, I mean, I kind of meant
Stuff?
from design, but also just from an overall recruiting issue or aspect of how these design firms are recruiting people. And are they you guys in Northern California are always doing things in a cutting edge way. And I didn't know if you had heard about anything that some of these firms are doing locally in your area to circumvent the challenge of finding really good people.
You know what I hear a lot of people saying, and this isn't going to sound new or trendy because it's not. It's just a really solid way, is to locate the schools that generate the best potential staff and students, and then grow your own people. And so they have upped their. A lot of the firms that I've talked with have really increased their presence on campus with firms that they value.
Okay.
And put a fair amount of effort into hiring really good people right out of school and then growing them.
Okay.
And then doing the best that they can to retain them.
Yeah.
And another, sort of creative, a client of ours was doing, they were paying student loans that was a way to defer costs for their hires. And I think it's a tax-free way to provide some income to staff.
You mean for student loan repayment?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's something about that that's actually valuable to both sides.
Yeah.
But it's a form of income to the new hire. And it's a creative way to, pay somebody a little more and not have it be in their base salary.
Yeah, it's becoming a retention tool, and there are several organizations out there like Gratify, based outside of in the suburbs of Boston, that are actually helping firms to implement this type of incentivization of, hey, you come work with us. We'll pay X amount of your student loans over the course of 5 years. Now, granted, they don't give it all to you in one fell swoop, but if somebody were to tell me, if I came out of school with $50,000 worth of student loans and I'm an architect, and some architectural firm said, look, we'll pay $5,000 a year over the next 5 years. Well, that's $25K of my $50,000 student loan debt that goes away. The average college student that comes out of school with about $35,000 in student loan debt. That's just the average. It doesn't matter what degree you receive. Mm-hmm. So I think it's important to understand that there are some ways to do that, and certainly I have encouraged some firms to consider that way in terms of creating a retention tool and also an extra carrot to get somebody to come maybe work at your firm versus another firm that either doesn't want to institute that kind of program or maybe not be in a position financially to do it. Well, then if you're able to do it, it gives you a leg up. Price Waterhouse is doing it now 100% across the board. You come to work at Price Waterhouse, it's my understanding that I don't know if they're using Gratify or another firm to implement this program, but there are a lot of creative ways to do it. And to get back to what you were saying about the tax implications, the way that the tax code is written right now, there is a tax payment that has to be made by the employee, but there is soon to be a law that will be passed in the House and in the Senate that will allow firms to pay that without putting a tax burden on the employee, if that makes sense. So, so they're working on a number of different ways to make this more palatable, because it is a benefit, and it does two things. One, it creates goodwill and starts to build retention, and it also helps a portion of students start to deal with their student loan debt, which is usually the biggest amount of debt that most kids have when they come out of school. So I think it's amazing.
True.
Yeah, I
that's
think it's
true.
amazing. So, well, that's good. But so what else? Is there anything else that you can think of that you're kind of seeing? And I mean, again, I know you work with some pretty unique firms, and you always have great stories to tell me about the candidates that you run across. But I was just curious to see what you think is going to happen over the next 6 to 12 months in the design space as it pertains to recruitment and retention, and if there's anything else that we should be looking out for.
Well, two things. One, I think people are going to get more serious about planning because it's a topic of conversation. I think it's being discussed more, and there's more of an understanding that it requires a real commitment and a plan, a recruitment plan, and it will involve people that are practitioners, not just an HR function. It's actually going to be something that the architects and the engineers and the leaders and the managers get involved with firsthand, and learn that it's a selling role.
Right.
So I think that there's just going to be more of a commitment to the plan of recruitment and how we as a firm need to address this and hold people accountable in the firm for bringing in ideas, bringing in connections to people, and making them responsible and part of the plan. Okay. And then the second thing is, like I said, this sort of gig economy approach to the temporary, I don't know if temporary is the right word, but the contract employees. Contract employees for that's probably going to become more and more common.
Yeah, look, listen, I told somebody this story the other day, but and I didn't even ask him, but my Uber driver in Charlotte the other day when I went to go visit a client that was taking me back to the airport, casually just mentioned to me that, because I said, well, how long have you been driving Uber? And he was like, oh, this is my first year. 2016 was my first year. And then he casually just mentioned to me that, I was doing this part-time and I made $31,000 driving Uber part-time. I mean, when people, just for context, I mean, Uber didn't exist in 2011, 2012. It's just taken off in the last few years, and now it's all over the place. And you've got people that are making full-blown salaries just driving people around. I mean, just the other night I had somebody pick me up from the airport and drive me 30 minutes, and he was telling me how he does it. And he said on some nights I can make $800. I mean, that's a lot of money for some people. And it's just amazing that the economy has changed that much. And I say all that to say that, is there ever going to be a day where if I'm running a design firm that I'm literally going to get on an app like Uber and, order up a project manager to come work on a project for 8 months that has a background in healthcare? I don't know, but I would, if I was a betting man, then I would say, in the next 3 to 5 years, you're going to see something along those lines, where you're going to be able to hire people in the design industry, are going to be able to hire experts, are going to be able to hire the core individuals that you would need to undertake a successful project, and then bring them on for a period of time to get that project done, and then, say goodbye to them afterwards. And then, when the time comes to do it again, you can either call on those people or maybe somebody else that might be available at that time to do that. I think people want that flexibility. I know the millennials love the idea of, some time on for work and then some time off to do other things for play. And so I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But I like you, am in agreement that this gig economy, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in the next few years. So
it is. I'm really curious about it because we're a client-focused service industry, and we provide service to client, which is very relationship-based, very people-oriented. And so, when we talk about this, it's hard for me to picture that because there are teams and face-to-face meetings and things that it's hard to imagine. But I think that you're right. I think that it's gonna have to change in some way for people to be able to meet the needs that they have for hiring and recruiting. If people aren't there, and we don't have the numbers and we don't have the access to talented people, everybody's going to have to get creative. And I think that's a pretty good creative way to meet some needs, maybe not all.
Yeah. I still think there's going to be a need to hire people full time all the time. But then, there are going to be certain projects where you're not able, just like you said, those 5 to 10 year people just don't exist. The few that are out there, obviously they're going to mature in age. So that gap that we see is going to move, but it'll still be there because it's going to be like, I need the 15 to 20 year person. And you're like, oh my God, 5 years from now, we're going to be like, well, that person doesn't exist. And so, that's the challenge that you find. So
that's right.
I think it's going to be really interesting. I really do. And so, that's exciting stuff. I'm excited to finally have you on to do this podcast because this this was the kind of conversation I knew we would be able to have. And with all of your experience and knowledge and just what you've seen in the industry, I think it's good for people to hear your perspective on things and what's going to happen and what has happened. So that's awesome, Chris. I'm so glad you decided to join us today. I really appreciate that. Listen, we are doing something new here on the TZL interview series, and we want to go deeper for our audience and learn who the real Chris Catton is, or as I like to call you, Catterific. But we have a couple of simple questions that we'll end our interview with, and hopefully we'll have some fun in the process. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
I am.
All right. What was the last book that you read? And I know you read voraciously. You tell me all the time you read more than you watch TV, which I think could be a lie, but I don't know. So
no, it's true. It's true. Watching TV puts me to sleep for some reason, but unless it's I've got a couple of favorites. But anyway, the last book. I read books all at the same time, so I oftentimes have several going at once, which is sort of confusing. But the last one I actually finished was called The Boys in the Boat. Okay. By Daniel Brown, because my daughter, my oldest daughter, 17-year-old, was racing crew for the Maroon crew team, and this book is about the formation of crew as a sport in the United States, and it's really well written. So that's the answer to your question.
Okay, cool. Boys in the Boat.
Boys in the Boat. It's a great book.
All right, cool. We'll have to check that out. We will we'll put a link to all this good stuff in our show notes. We want to make sure that everybody has information about that. Where did you go on your last vacation?
I went to the Oregon coast, which was very interesting because we had a major snowstorm and I got snowed in for an extra 2 days. Wow. I'm from Portland, so I have family there.
All right. So when you watch Portlandia, does that resonate with you?
Yes, that's the show I was going to say when I fall asleep when I watch TV unless it's Portlandia. I watched that show. It's so good. So it's really real.
Yeah, it is. So that when you watch it, do you see places like I know that place, or I know? Okay, that's cool.
A lot of it is filmed in Northeast Portland, which is actually where I stay when I go because I stay with family there, and they've really pegged the town of Portland.
Wow!
In that show, they've got it. They've got it down.
That's awesome. Well, my next question was, if you could binge watch one TV series, old or new, what would it be? But I think I know the answer to that. It would either be Portlandia or what? The Brady Bunch? I don't know.
It's Portlandia.
It is Portlandia. Okay. All right. So there we go. Well, there you have it, folks. That a little glimpse into the life of Chris Catton. Chris, I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to be with us on the Zweig Letter interview series. We really, really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Randy.
Yeah.
It was fun.
Cool. Well, listen, folks, as a reminder, all Zweig Group Media programs like this one are available in both podcast and, in most cases, video format, free for download on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and YouTube, just to name a few places. We'd like to thank you for watching this in video or listening to the podcast by offering you a free copy of the Zweig Letter. Just visit freetzl.zweiggroup.com. And a link to all of this information will be in our show notes. So you'll be able to download that to your heart's content. And we would love it if you share this link with a friend. And also, if you're listening to this on iTunes, we'd love a 5-star rating. If you really feel like this podcast really meets your need, we'd love it. We'd love a generous rating from you. And if you have any feedback whatsoever, because we're constantly trying to improve, please share that information with us. I'm Randy Wilburn, and you've been listening to Zweig Group Media, part of Zweig Group. Remember, we exist to make you more successful. Bye for now.
Thanks for tuning in to this special edition Zweig Letter podcast. We hope that you can apply Mark's no-holds-barred advice to your daily professional life. For a free 6-week subscription of the Zweig Letter, please visit freetzl.zweiggroup.com to gain more wisdom and inspiration, in addition to information about leadership, finance, HR, and marketing your firm. Subscribe today.